Hi. I missed y'all. It's been a while. I don't know if you missed me, but I missed you. Yeah, kind of. I guess we can kick it off a little bit. But hey, welcome to another episode of Diaper Bag Dad. I'm your host, Stephen with the PH. Yeah, it feels good to be back in this chair. It feels really good. I'm kind of dusting things off a little bit. I've been gone for about a month or so. I think the last recording was August 6th, I want to say. So, yeah, I missed you. I missed the hell out of you. I missed doing this. I missed letting my hair down. I missed talking to people. We do have a guest, so I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, it should be a good show. I'm trying my damnness to be consistent at this, but my lifestyle doesn't really dictate that I'm able to live by this schedule. I can live by my home schedule, my wife's schedule, my kid's schedule, but me having time to do this all the time, it's whenever I can make some space for myself. So I'm working on that. I'm looking forward to it. Jordan.
Steven, great to see you, brother.
You too, man. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure to be here, man. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, it's cool to have another person in the seat and to get their perspective and to see the world how they see it. Because I think that's important that we're able to share those pieces of us because there's somebody out there that can get it, right? Because unless you have a mentor and a mentee, unless you're a mentor and you have a mentee, you're kind of talking to the same people, right? Yeah. Like your significant other, your core group of friends, your family. You're not really reaching who you may want to reach who could benefit from that message, right? It's kind of like when you climb up your success ladder and you leave some people behind because they're not able to have that same vehicle as you. They don't have the same skill as you, and they need to learn these things, but there's nobody translating that back. So it's cool to have a space where we can reach faces we won't ever meet. But they're like, yeah, what he said, that hit. So for me, it's that.
Yeah.
For me, it's that. That's it. So I wanted to put that out there. There will be an episode coming up where I probably have my daughter on and we thumb through it, probably do like some kind of split screen animation PDF where the pages are turning while she's reading it. And I want to give her some shine because 2 days ago when I left the gym, I damn near cried because I was thinking about their minds and the possibility of no restrictions. So where I was at in 5 and growing up as a kid in Compton, no, you can't go there. Don't do that. Very limiting, right? So all you know is what you know. She doesn't. It's possible. She's a 5-year-old entrepreneur. I think she's made I want to say $200.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the two things I would say right off.
Yeah, what's that?
Number one, the fact that she knows what a chrysalis is, incredibly impressive at 5. And then secondarily, her penmanship, her handwriting is phenomenal.
Okay.
So those are the two things that jumped out to me right away.
She missed school a few days this week because of doctor's appointments. She went back to school. She became star of the day. So there's this book of kids that wrote hey, to Isla and their name. So when I saw their penmanship and I was able to compare it with Isla's, then I was like, oh, I see where you're at.
She's killing it. Right?
I see where you're at.
To this handwriting game,
there's
right?
Levels. So then I was like, it makes sense now. Because again, it's kind of like when you see your kids and you're like, you're tall, but you're tall the way we see you tall.
You need a
but when you see
comparison, right?
When you see her standing next to another kid and she's still taller than all the kids in her class this year and last year, then they're like, oh, like these things kind of make sense, right? And then people see her 2-year-old and they're like, she's tall. And I'm like, nah, she's short because see her sister. They're like, no, that's a tall 2-year-old. I'm like, I see her next to her 2-year-old. And I'm like, oh. So it all hits. It all hits now. So, but yes, my daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, Isla Noah.
Cheers.
Congratulations, Queen.
Cheers to Isla. This is impressive. You guys did a good job with that.
Thank you.
I just like the binding, the about the author page.
Yeah.
By the way, she looks just like Shanila.
She does, right? That's her mini me. Yes. That's her mini me. Saoirse's more me, but Isla's definitely mom.
Well, probably the artistic side and all that. I mean, I don't know enough about how
Shanila illustrates.
Oh, she is.
Shanila illustrates. So the writing.
She gets
both.
the artistic creativity from both sides.
You nailed it. The writing is like that's my bag. Like the illustration, I'm still in stick figures, bro. Like I'm still like, can I? Where's this line go? That's me. But yeah. So anyway, I needed to put that out there because this is like the most recent thing we've been rocking with for the past couple weeks.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, man. And
we're here talking about parenting and all that, right?
My whole heart smiled with that. But yeah, man, we're here for you too. We're here for you. So before we start, tell the people a little about you, man. Like who you are, what you do, what's important to you. Like a brief little snapshot that the people that will see this, they're like, I want to know about him and what's his past and his background. And obviously, we'll go to some of our details based on the questions and some of our things that you and I talked about before. But let people know about you, man.
Sure. Yeah. Where to begin? My name is Jordan Bryce, which I'm sure there will be an introduction at the beginning of this. But my name is Jordan Bryce. I would say, just diving into like 3 quick things. So the first thing is as a professional, I work as an area VP for DocuSign, popular e-signature company. I've been with them for about 3.5 years now.
Okay.
Majority of my career has been spent in sales leadership in some form or fashion. It started out in sales and then translated into sales leadership over time. I attribute that journey and that path to 2 things. I think I found out pretty early on in my working career that I really like to influence outcomes.
Okay.
Right. And so influencing outcomes, sales and influencing outcomes kind of go hand in hand.
For sure.
But then what I also found is that I love to help people. I love to see the light bulb turn on with people. And I think that, and also I'm extremely competitive. So those 3 things I think made not just sales, but sales leadership.
Okay.
My, like kind of my bag or my niche. Right.
Yeah.
On the parenting side of things, so the second thing is about like, who I am family wise.
Right.
I'm originally parent wise, I'm a father to 5 children.
Okay.
I think what makes me unique is that the age range of my children. My oldest is 22 years old.
Okay.
And my youngest is 6 months old.
That's
right?
a range.
So if you do the math,
that's a range.
That's a almost 22-year age difference between the oldest and the youngest. And then I've got a 22-year-old son, 19-year-old son, 16-year-old daughter, 9, almost 10-year-old daughter,
Okay.
and now a 6-month-old daughter.
Okay.
So I've got high schoolers, I've got college age, I've got elementary age, and now I've got an infant. So
I think you're just trying to corner the market. You're like industry.
Right now.
You're like industry. Yeah, that's cool, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so
that's
it's
awesome.
it's so interesting.
That's all. That's a lot of love, man.
It is a lot of love.
That's a lot of love.
I think a lot of people, when they think about like having a big family, or a lot of people think of things like love as like, I only have so much love to give. And what I have found is that love is limitless.
For sure.
When it comes to your children, especially, right? So, and it's, I think we'll dive pretty deep into how my parenting has evolved over the last 22 years and how I've continually tried to just evolve from the way that I was raised to keeping a lot of those values of how I was raised, but assimilating it into like the world that we live in today and the world that they're growing up in.
Yes.
And then also things that I think I'm grateful to my parents because they put me in a position where I could be successful in life, where I could achieve things more than what they had achieved, which opened my eyes to new things and new experiences and things that I want to put into my kids.
Yeah.
Right? So family-wise, 5 kids, married, been married for 3 years.
Okay.
So I was married previously for a long period of time, for almost 15 years.
Okay.
And then got remarried in late 2021.
Okay.
So I'm coming up on 3 years.
I'm gonna pause there and say congrats on that too.
Thanks, my man. Appreciate it, my brother. Yes. Yes.
Again, the theme of love, right? Like whether it's fatherhood, whether it's your significant other, they tend to show us. Like we get reflections, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you say your kids and saying like, hey, like a lot of love to give, or you find that it's limitless, you have the understanding that it's redefined from their lens because you have a very specific perspective, right? And then what you pour into them and what they give you back, it shows you just so many different levels and dichotomies of who we are as humans, because we have the capacity. Like I think we limit us all the time, right? Like we get to a point where we're like, I could do this because that's the goal, that's the benchmark. And it's kind of like when, going back to athletics, I think when the first time somebody broke, was it the 4-minute mile? Right? Like people had a
mental block.
A mental block. It cannot be done. And then after the first person did it,
everybody started doing it.
Then it became such
Very
a trickle down effect, right? So now it's just status quo. Like now that's the new standard. So at some point in time, somebody may try to do a 3-minute mile. I have no idea. That's crazy. But we get these snippets of life and what it's really about the human condition, about the ability to touch and reach out and have that connection. And that comes from those interpersonal relationships. It comes through parenthood. It comes through, finding that person, because that's like physics by itself, right? Like, how do you get two people? How do they find each other? Like, what is the circumstance of that? All the decision process, like this countless, endless butterfly effect of like, how do you bring two people together based off where that person's life was, where they were born, where at, and finding you and finding each other. Like, so we'll get into life and love, but yeah, man, that's amazing. That's amazing that you were able to find that again, because a lot of people don't find it the first time, right? Just based off of circumstances of life and going through their own trauma, going through their experiences where things are stripped from them and they don't have the ability to, or they make their heart cold. So that's cool. That's cool that you're able to find that again, man.
Yeah, I'm incredibly blessed, incredibly just happy that I've found my true partner to support me.
Yeah.
Through the here and now,
okay.
the journey that we're on now, but for the rest of my life, like straight up, like the homie, right? Like we kick it every night when we put the baby to bed. Like we just spend time kicking it, like just talk, like life in general, professionally, what's going on in politics, what's happening, what's something funny that the kids did today. Okay. What is some video she sees on TikTok or Instagram that she wants to show me, because I'm not a big social media guy. Okay. So this is just last night. I'm just walking you down like our journey last night, right?
Yeah.
So, and then so
Netflix and chill.
For sure.
Netflix and chill. Like, we have our time.
Yes. Yes.
And I've said this on the pod before on that, because I envy that. And I say that because the last one-on-one date that my wife and I had was when our almost 6-year-old was 9 months old.
Wow.
Let that sink in.
She was babysitters, right?
Right. But bro, this is such a weird world. And we are the type. It's related to our trauma. I mean, part of it is the safety, the protection of it, but the intentionality of parenting. Like, we really wanted to make sure that, before I finish that, so we have not put our kids in daycare. We don't do that. The only time that our daughter has been away from us has been when she started school, when she started TK. Now she's in kindergarten. Like, that was the only time, right? But apart from that, if she's not with me, she's with her, which is why I can do this, because my wife is not working and my kids are at home. And we got to a point where we're starting to expand that now. Right now, we're just now getting into that, where we found people that are pouring into them as much as they're pouring into us. And I think that was also a barrier, is that we had relationships, but our kids didn't have relationships with them. So we weren't just putting them with any Tom, Dick, or Harry. It's like, are you invested into the entire package, right? And that was important for us. So when we see our kids kind of gravitate to certain people and they've nurtured these relationships with our kids, that makes us feel better. That makes us dethrottle and relax and not hover or helicopter or airplane or whatever those terms are, that we know our kids are safe, right? Like, we won't do sleepovers. Like, if somebody does a sleepover, if our kids want sleepovers, kids are coming to our house. If we want to do sleepovers, we're there too. You know, some 40-year-olds in the corner, in the sleeping bag, like, you okay, babe? Like, we are very specific because we know not every household's the same, and there's just so much that happens to kids that kind of stop and impede who they're going to be. 100%. And a lot of times is when you blink that happens. So we're just now getting comfortable with, hey, like, babe, like, let's go on a date. Hey, we can call ABC. Like, we have 2-3 options now when we didn't. But that was also a goal of ours. Like, when we have our next kid, because we want to have a third pregnancy, when we have our next child, we want to have an infrastructure in place where we have a team, right? Because our individual, our families, our blood ties aren't involved. So that's another reason that kind of contributes to that, which is why I said the trauma part, right? We don't have grandparents to take them to, right? We don't have anybody saying, hey, like, how can I make your life easier? How can I help you? And that's by doing this. So that's had its own very specific nuances within the dynamic of my marriage, within the dynamic of parenthood. But it's shifting. And I can say that, and it feels good for that to be the case, just so I can be an adult again, right? And have my friend back, and not pack so much of our day into like an hour and a half before like we end our day, end our night, right? Because when we put our kids to sleep, our 5-year-old still likes to find ways to kind of come out, so that it stops that. And I'm like, babe, like, I'm trying to spend time with your mom. Like, we're trying to talk, right?
Yeah.
Like, and just be us.
Grown up time.
And just be us, right? So, but that's cool, man. That's amazing that you get to have your relationship and cultivate that, and consider her your homie. You know what I mean? Consider her like, that's your dog. Like, we're just kicking it. Like, we're people. We're friends. Because I think we lose that, like the love there, and we have the responsibilities, but like the friendship.
It's so important. It's so important.
Yeah.
But what you said, I completely agree. I have the same policy with my daughters.
Yeah.
I actually was a little more laissez-faire with the boys, the first two.
For all you non-educated people out there, it means hands off.
Laissez-faire.
Right. It's French term.
Lax.
It's a French term. It was related to government's hands into natural society.
Yes.
All right.
But yeah, I mean, the reality is that like, my mindset towards, I'm very, very aware of the fact that a lot of negative things happen to girls in particular. And I don't want my daughters to be exposed to that. So
yeah.
You know, our house, that's one of the reasons why I make sure that, you know, my house is very, very like a fun place for kids to want to come.
Okay.
Right. Between a swimming pool and different sorts of things. Right.
Okay.
And the reason why is because I want my house to be the place where things happen, as opposed to sending my daughters out.
Makes sense.
And it's just it's the reality of the world that we live in, that there are a lot of predators out there that,
for sure,
you know, if you're not very careful with your daughters and sons too, but it wasn't like it was just like a free for all and they could go anywhere, right?
Right.
Like we still vetted families and parents out and all those different sorts of things, made sure that, like, you know, we weren't sending them to, like, you know, the jungle or whatever, right? But or just a crazy, you know, just a crazy environment. But yeah, no, I completely agree, and you're right. Like, all it takes is, you know, one bad experience that completely changes who that child is going to
the trajectory.
That could be trauma.
The trajectory for they're going to be.
Harm the overall outcome, right? And so as a parent, as a father, I'm very, very outcome oriented, right? Yeah. Meaning that I'm always thinking ahead, like, what am I teaching my kids right now? Like, what's the lesson to be learned in this moment how's that going to play out when they're 35 years old, 40 years old? Right. Like, because there's so many opportunities as a parent to do the easy thing, right? Which is like, give them a tablet or give in if they want something. Yeah. That's the path of least resistance. What I have found in parenting is almost always leads to the worst possible outcome for who that person's going to be when they're an adult, right? So I'm known for it. So of course, you know, I have the reputation between my kids of being the parents a little bit more strict, right?
Oh,
The
okay.
parent that's
Okay,
a little
got
bit
it.
more,
Got
what
it.
I'm saying?
Got it.
And the reason why is because because
They're like, you're that dude.
yeah, but I mean I try to balance it with fun. Obviously I'm a behind closed doors, I'm probably one of the goofiest people you'll ever see,
Yeah.
you'll ever meet.
But we want to see that here too. We want that
but
here
it's gotta
too.
be
Whatever. Yeah.
Organic,
Okay.
right? It's
Yeah.
gotta
No,
be
for sure.
organic. I'm sure it'll come out a few
sure.
times, but
Got
I'm
it.
very goofy, huge sense of humor, so it's not like it's all like strict all the time.
Yeah, no, you're a whole human being.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think again that's what people miss because we wear certain hats and we for lack of a better term we mask up, right? Like we are different people in different environments. And I think the authenticity is when you're able to kind of merge those identities because you have the freedom to do so, right? Like those spaces allow you to do that. So I understand what you're saying, but for me, it's what I want because I want everything stripped down, but that's just me. And my wife had to remind me, like even when I invited some other people on, she's like, some people may not hit and resonate with them the same way it has for you because that's been your journey as far as when you were able to say you're comfortable doing this, right? Or you're finding your comfort to do this. I was like, oh, that makes sense. I said, because my journey is not somebody else's journey.
Yeah.
So that really hit for me. And babe, I do listen to you. Like it does sink in. I promise you. My processing is a little slow at times, but yeah. So yeah, no, that makes sense, man, because we all have the capacity to do amazing things and really, really horrible things, right? Yeah. Like, because we're human, and that's how it is. Like when somebody has the answer of talking to whoever the creator is, and if the creator has a creator, and et cetera, and down and whatever, then maybe we get an answer. But that's who we are. So we have the ability, the capacity to love and hate, and everything in between that are kind of the facets of who we are as people, and that's why. Your family gets the softer side, right? And you're able to wrap them up in that kind of warmth and that embrace. And obviously, when you're in a professional setting, you have to wear a very specific hat. You still can embrace the people that work under you or who you're trying to inspire and walk through that, but they're not going to get that piece of you because that is when you're able to say, hey, that's for them. That's that group there. Until if at some point in time they cross over. And then they're treated like family as such, right? Because family, for me, it's not just blood ties, obviously. For me, in my journey is the ability of the people you kind of come across and meet and that have interwoven and intermixed into your life that pour into you. They become family for me.
Absolutely. Completely agree. I think it's, limiting when you think of family, when you think very linearly of like, unless this person shares a bloodline with me, then they can't be considered family.
Right.
Some of the most closest people to me in my life are obviously long time, very good friends. And, just people who have come into my life and impacted me in different ways. People who've taken me under their wing. I've been fortunate to have great mentors.
Nice.
At different points in my life.
Nice.
Yeah. So, completely get it, man.
Yeah. Those friends that are part of your life they go all the way back to childhood, middle school, high school?
Oh man!
How far do they go back? Like, do you have a core group of?
Yeah, I have a couple of different core groups, right? So I have like I would say like my closest friends. One of them I met in kindergarten.
Okay. In kindergarten.
Yeah, we met in kindergarten.
So where my daughter's at now, like 5, 6 years old.
What's that?
5, 6 years old. About that.
So I think I was 4 at the time.
Okay.
Because I started school early. I started school when I was 4.
Okay.
And he's like 6 months older than me, so he was 5, I was 4.
Yeah.
And we've been, in each other's weddings and in each other's lives to support each other. We both went through divorce.
Okay.
Co-parenting, teenage daughters. Like we just have so many parallels. Like coming from lower middle class to middle class. Start.
Okay.
To now ascending into finding success in our career and being able to do different things for our family that our parents and grandparents only dreamed of.
Okay.
Right? So that's one of my very good friends, and then
I'll plug real quick right there. That sounds like a podcast. That sounds like a podcast, like the ability for you to walk through that and unpack that based off the journey, right? And there's no better thing to have chemistry with the person, but to really kind of let a light shine in on, kind of the origin story, and then walking through how you said, kind of lower middle class to finding success in your field to experiencing some of the same things in life at different points in time, but being able to, again, wrap your arm around him and vice versa and say, hey, like, you'll get through this. And because that was actually a question of mine. Like,
he actually has a podcast too.
Does he?
But he is in the finance world.
Okay.
And so his podcast is so I'll plug him right now. His name is Emlyn Miles Mattingly.
There's a Miles in there too.
Yeah.
Jordan.
It's an I though, not a Y.
Jordan likes the Miles.
I fool with the Miles piece.
There it is. There it is.
Yeah. So he's the principal and owner of Gen Next Wealth,
okay.
which is he's a financial advisor. Been doing it for a lot of years.
So I'll circle back around to you and him then when I get my when I circle back around to my fintech product.
Okay.
Because that's how I left B of A, was trying to I found a gap in service within that industry. And then it was to really kind of target small and medium-sized businesses and have a really kind of partner relationship with how they acquire merchant sales, right? So I paused that because I failed drastically over those 7 years. Still crazy in my head of trying to get that into some kind of level of investment and pitching and whatnot. And then I actually got I have my EdTech app and Tech Accelerator. So we touched on that, I think, a little bit on it.
We chatted about that.
Yeah. So when that kicks off, when I find success there, and I will find success there, now I will pour money back into the fintech product. Because it has to do more with the ability to create generational wealth for people of a global majority and people of color and marginalized groups, and the conversation of where we don't have certain access, to tools and to resources to be able to climb out, one, mentally of a space, but just the circumstances, because there are so many things that are layered and built into the systems of lending, of buying, right? Like, quick story, if my wife put my name on our mortgage, the percentage rates would have drastically skyrocketed because of what I look like phenotypically versus what she looks like phenotypically, right? So there truly is a component that is woven into systems.
Now?
Right? Yeah. So when we got her home, like, the percentage rate would have...
Was it credit based or was it like... I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Like what...
Yes.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Which,
so
that's a deep conversation that we can
right,
go,
for sure.
Go very deep on a bunch of different levels.
This is not that podcast, but I'm saying there are things that
that's
block.
Wild, though.
There are things that block and keep people in certain spaces and places.
Sure.
So when you said so financial services, when you kind of open up that conversation, it's the ability to disseminate information that allows people to know there is a lifeline where they can gain information, and that information, the ones that find true value in it, will utilize that and have it be a springboard for them to climb out of certain situations economically, right? And not just being tied to, again, this is your worth, because that's typically coming from somebody outside of the community and saying, because you are in the space or from the space, and that's where you deserve to be. So that's a different one. But going back to your friend, I think that's the dynamic of, again, those kinds of relationships and the ability for you to say that we've gone through similar parts in our life. Like, you have similar stories, we have similar chapters, and it is helping. It is saying, how can I be there for you? How can I support you? So like I said, that was one of my questions, like how, later on, it's maybe jumping into now. So between finding your new love, walking from a relationship that didn't work out the way that you probably hoped or intended or planned it to be, is he one of the ones you leaned on? Who did you lean on to pick up those pieces? Because I can only imagine how hard that is to actually experience that, and especially now that I am married. 13-year anniversary coming up, by the way. That's around the corner. September 13th, my wife and I, 13 years.
You guys are teenagers. Coming up on preteens right now. Coming up on
our favorite ever. So I'll take that. And how did I'm a product of a divorced household. Who did you, and obviously part of it, I'm sure, is your friend. How did you pick up those pieces? How did you find yourself again to that?
I want to call out one more friend just
Do that.
my other
Do that.
from early on in childhood. This
Yeah.
is my best friend in the world.
Okay.
We met in 5th grade, and he has been in the Marine Corps for 25 years.
Okay.
He's ascended very high up. So when I talk about picking up the pieces, I lean on those two guys very heavily. I also have a very close friend group that I went to high school with.
Are they friends?
Yeah, we're all the three of us.
Oh, okay.
The three of us are like a holy trinity, right?
Okay.
And then I have a very close friend group that I went to high school with because I transferred. I'm originally from Madera, finished my high school career at Washington Union the last 2.5 years that I was in high school.
That's when we met.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. When you were at Clovis West
Yeah.
playing ball and I was playing at Washington Union.
I was more bench than playing ball, but
I started out as a bench player. In my
no,
senior year,
but you rocked it. You rocked it. Yeah,
it was
Yeah.
definitely a fun time.
Yeah.
But so I got my close buddies from my high school days, and I have my day ones. I leaned a lot on my friends. I leaned a lot on introspection.
And were those friends married at that time?
So yes, almost all my entire friend group just about was all married, right?
Okay.
So in a lot of ways, it felt like I was kind of going through it on my own, right? Just because there wasn't nobody going through it at the same. Now I have friends who had went through divorce, who I had helped through divorce or whatever, right? But nobody simultaneously at the same time as me.
I was asking the married part because it's different to be married versus having single friends, right? Versus married having married friends.
Yes.
The mentality is different. They can't and won't understand. The single ones, they can't and won't understand what it is you're doing on a daily, and even some of the unspoken things. So that's why I asked that, because it's very specific and more in your domain when somebody's like, I this is my life and I live this to be able to seek advice or to lean on. But go ahead.
As I'm continuing to think about that question, that's a deep question. I would say I leaned on three things. I would say I really poured myself into work at that point in time.
Okay.
Because it became real, right? You go from two different working parents, dual income.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden, now it's me on my own,
right?
Right. Like, so thinking about things like, how do I create generational wealth? How do I make sure that I can pay for my kids' college? So there's just so many different things. This is the way my mind works. I'd say the second thing was definitely my kids. I poured myself into my children. I understood that with a marriage ending, now my children were going to be, growing up in two different, we're going to be in two different households.
Okay.
So I really wanted to make sure that, I was like, look, if this is the way it's going to be, I got to step up even more as a father, right? The pressure. You don't have somebody in the household that hey, I only got 20% today. It was a terrible day at work.
Right.
And then that person's there to pick up the slack. At that point in time, it's you and you only.
That's
right?
key. That's key for sure, because we pour in and then we get depleted.
Yeah.
And so I find myself at the end of my day highly dysregulated because I'm trying to rush them through. I'm like, why are we stretching out bedtime? Why is it taking you so long to brush your teeth? You want a book? And you want a book? You both want a book? I'm like, babe, don't make them laugh right now. No. So because I'm trying to get to that. I'm trying to get to that time with my wife, as well as trying to get to the time that I have to take it off. Right. Because you run it from the time you get up. And my day starts with our puppy moaning to go outside, and that could be anywhere between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. So if it's not a gym day for me, I'm like, why? So yeah. But yeah, we get depleted, and there's nothing like having, like you said, having that partner hey, I don't got it right now. Right. And for them to pick it up. So you were figuring that out and walking through that.
You lose that
yeah,
when you go through a divorce, right? Yeah. And so and then I would say the third thing that I leaned on was a lot of just my extended family, right? Okay. Whether it was spending time with people, whether it was just talking with people about their experiences, it just took a village to kind of go through that whole thing, work through it, and to come out on the other side. Most importantly, I think is and also introspectively being dead ass honest with myself about what I did to contribute to the failure of that marriage, right? and
Some self-reflection.
It's very easy to just hone in on all the ways that you felt like that partner was not the partner that you needed, right?
Okay.
That's the easiest. That's
Okay.
the easiest thing to do.
Okay.
What's much harder is to sit there and look yourself in the mirror and be honest with yourself that like there's a lot of things that you did to contribute to that made that person, you know,
Yeah.
you didn't show up as a partner that person needed, which in turn, you know, led to them not showing up to be like, you know, bottom line is like just accepting my responsibility
Okay.
and that not working out and that ending, and then learning from it, most importantly, right? Not repeating the same mistakes.
Okay.
As I entered, you know, a new relationship and starting a, you know,
Was therapy at all part of the process for you?
no,
Just
I'll
those
tell you
groups?
why-
Just
I'll
those
tell you
groups?
why- yes, just those groups. And I'll tell
Okay.
you, like for me personally, I've always struggled with therapy, and I think the reason why I've struggled with therapy is I think a big part of therapy is it's not necessarily solution oriented, and the way my brain works.
Oh, okay.
The way my brain
Okay.
works is like I want an outcome, right? Like
Got
I
it.
want a solution. I want to
No,
solve
yeah,
a
because
problem.
no, therapy is definitely process.
Yeah. Yes.
Therapy is
So,
definitely process driven for sure.
Yeah. So for me, I've always really struggled with like, okay, we're going to sit here and we're going to talk. And I may feel like I got some stuff off my chest or whatever, and I feel heard. But are we solving the problem? Or are we just talking through
Got
feelings
you.
and emotions and all
Got
that?
it.
So maybe it's just my brain's a little too, like
Got
I'm just
it.
a very logically minded person
No worries.
in general. But yeah, so anyways.
No, I mean, the part of the strength of that and the acknowledgement of that is knowing who you are, knowing yourself.
Well, I've learned, these are things that I've learned.
So that
over
makes
time.
it makes sense. It's okay to be like that doesn't work for me, even though somebody's suggesting it. Like, you know, it's not just deading it, right? Like you're like, no, you're like I tried it and it doesn't fit for me.
Yeah, it's not. It's not
or even this, that,
valid.
right?
It's not that
So,
there's not.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
like that therapy is not super necessary for a lot of people. It's just for me. What I have found is that like I'm just a very introspective person. I read a lot, and I'm constantly thinking about how am I showing up in the world? Am I the man that I want, that I aspire to be? Am I falling short? And just like a lot of self accountability, I think is a very important thing and healthy for me.
Okay.
And has helped me to become a far better husband to my current wife.
Yeah,
and also a better father too.
Right.
This time around, I know that we're gonna probably talk a lot about parenting here in
Yeah.
a few, but yeah. So that was a challenging time. It was a difficult time, but I would also say that like it had to happen for me to be who I am today.
Okay.
Right? It had to happen. Everything had to happen exactly the way that it happened to have life be where it is in this moment, to have me be at peace.
That makes sense.
Content, confident in who I am as a father, confident in who I am as a working professional, confident in who I am as a man, and and what I stand for and stand on. Like everything in life, all the mistakes, all the triumphs, all those things had to happen just in order that they happened for us to be sitting in this room right now having this conversation.
Yeah.
You
It's it's the authenticity of it all, right? Because you have to look at the ugly parts. Right? Like if you're just waking up every day and, it's a Disney movie and there's birds singing, singing in harmony, and you're like, "Oh, everything feels good." Like you have to look at the parts that you don't want to look at.
Yeah.
And that's where the honesty comes into play, because that's where the growth happens, when there are the failures or the lessons that you can learn from the thing that did not work out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you had a try, man, because again, a lot of people don't, right? And a lot of people slip back into same old familiar patterns. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't walk away from a relationship that doesn't serve them. Mm-hmm. So that's amazing that you're able to turn that around and then again to find love, like, and mm-hmm. to have a new child and extend your family. Because a lot of people get stuck. So that's cool, man. Yeah. Like definitely kudos and big ups to you on that. How long was your healing process? Like before you were saying, hey, I'm ready to even try to date again. Like what that was like for you?
Was, I mean, they were close together, right? I would without going too deep into like the state of my first marriage, I think my first marriage was broken for a period of time before it was officially over, right?
Okay.
So there's that. We may want to snip that, by the way.
I got you.
But yeah, so I think what's more important was I understood I understood what I needed from a partner,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And when you make a decision, so my first wife and I, we dated for a long. We were in high school. We were a couple. Spent some time apart, and then got back together when I was like maybe 20. Married by the time I was 22, and what I realized now is that what I needed in a partner. I didn't really understand what I needed in a partner.
Okay.
Because I didn't even know myself at that time.
Makes
You understand
sense.
what I'm saying? I
No,
was
I
still
do.
finding
I do.
myself. I
do.
was still developing who I was going to be as a
I do.
man. And so when you make lifelong decisions at a young age, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's a dice roll whether or not that person is going to continue to grow. The two of you are going to grow and evolve in the same direction, or if you're going to go on divergent paths.
So what you're saying at getting married at 22 is basically what happened to me at like 27, 28, because now I'm learning and finding myself, and then that's happening under the umbrella of marriage, right? So like now all this discovery is like, I question like damn near everything. I'm like, does this fit? Is this right? Like, and I did way more finger pointing then, because again, I wasn't developed. Like I was a kid. If you're saying you said 13 years, we're hitting teenagers in marriage. Like I was crawling in my marriage, right? Because I had not done it. I think I had three boyfriend girlfriend relationships prior to getting married, and then the rest of it in between that was other stuff. But
More casual stuff, right? Short-term stuff.
Better word. Better phrase. But all that was still finding myself. I was still finding me, in my marriage. And I can understand the stress, right? Like that's a stress test. Like I challenged everything that she probably thought believed in who I was as a person, even though she knew the foundation of what it was, even though I knew my core. But how does that play out in a relationship, and does that person have enough patience and long suffering to meet you where you're going to arrive to? So I get that. I get that early stage of your relationship, of when you two got married and then building that together. Yeah, it's nothing but discovery. It's nothing but you walking on a path of like, oh yeah, I like that. That feels good, and no, I want to do that too. And like you're just figuring it out. You're not set in who you are. It wasn't the early 1900s where like people get married and this is what it is, and
at like 15 years old, and
right,
24,
right. It was a whole nother. That's a whole nother topic as far as
15, like
whole nother topic about that.
Yeah,
but it's not that. It wasn't the fact of like these relationships start at this very early time, and then that's this is what it's going to be for the rest of our life. So so you were understanding that, and unpacking that for yourself and under the hat of marriage.
Yeah, and bottom line is we all make mistakes. We're all fallible as humans, but do you learn from those mistakes, or do you make the necessary changes and adjustments? And so, I'm proud to say that like I have a phenomenal marriage now, right? Like we're extremely supportive of each other. Like from a communication perspective, I think that's where I've grown the most. Is I think my natural, and this is true for a lot of dudes, right? Like our natural thing is like when there's conflict or when there's disagreements, we oftentimes tend to like kind of just shut down and shut people out.
Shut down and retreat.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like
shut down and retreat.
Yeah. And
which is the system. That's the thing we were talking about. Like before we press record and started this, that's the pink or blue thing.
Yep.
So when society has raised the generations of men that say bottle this, keep this to yourself, we get less communicative, right? We don't want to share, and couple that with being a natural introvert for some people, you're like, it's hell doing that. Like, no, I don't want to talk to you right now, right?
Yeah.
And then the only then the only expression we express then would be anger, right? Like it's just the frustration of the buildup. It's not what are healthy ways of understanding emotional intelligence. What are ways that we can go through some practices, some tools, some best tricks and tips for our relationship to get us to the solution, right? Like how you said, you're solution oriented, to get you to the end of this uncomfortable spot, right? Because now that we're going at it, or whatever the disagreement or fight, or how we define that, whatever that is, it's easier to not. It's easier to
path of least
just
resistance.
Yeah, right.
What did I say earlier? There's always a readily available option.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes, whether it's parenting or being a husband or in work or whatever, there's always a readily available option that is the path of least resistance. Very rarely is that's what's going to lead to the optimal
Sure.
outcome. Very rarely is that path what's going to lead you to the optimal outcome that you want, that's going to bring you happiness or fulfillment or whatever.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
And so,
I think that would be the very definition of privilege versus like growing through what you go through, right? The people that have lived where life didn't just say, here, this is yours. Like, where life didn't do that, because you had to figure it out. You had to walk yourself through the struggle, right? And the mud, like getting socked in the face, all right? Like nursing your bruises. You had to walk through things for you to kind of be battle tested, so to speak, right? Because life didn't say this is easy for you. It's handed to you. Like, you want to do this? Yeah, here's an investment for your business. You want to do this? Yeah, you want to go to that school, that, and have that education, because it opens up that network to do that job. Like, if that is not your path, and that is not your life, that is not your last name, it is the work. And a lot of that happens to come from being able to say you want to change your direction, right? And you need to understand who you are as an individual. You need to understand who you are at knowing that these are your blind spots and what you need to kind of sharpen for you to get there. And it is only through that adversity that happens, because that's what gives you the opportunity to learn the lesson, to fix those tools, right? And then to pass those tools to our kids, right? Like, that's the only reason, like, how my 5-year-old can be a 5-year-old, because she doesn't have the limitations or the trauma of life saying you're not able to do that. Right. And then I have the ability of saying, I want to break that trauma so that she knows that she can. Right. So let's go in that direction. Let me feed her that. Let me give her that affirmation.
Let me just not necessarily pass down the trauma or the limitations that were imposed upon you, or that you were brought up to believe.
Right.
Breaking free of that and allowing her to feel unlimited.
And going back to the early stages of my marriage, that's what it was, because that's all that I knew, and that's all that I had. All I had was who I was raised to be. And I didn't challenge anything about it. There was no, conflict analysis. Like, there wasn't anything of me breaking that down on, like, what's my personality, what's my behavioral type, like how to respond in these situations, right? I didn't know that about me. And again, that's still the figuring out process. So yeah, no, that makes a whole hell of a lot of sense, man. Like, as you walk yourself through life, and you get those bumps, and then you have to stare at the ugly parts, and you look at yourself in the mirror, and you're honest with you, and you're like, this does not serve who I am. This is not who I want to be. If I want to be that person that I see over there, because I feel that I can, and I know I have the ability to, I have to make a change. Yeah, man. I mean, that's a lot of growth. That's a lot of, and then, like you said, and then impacted other areas of your life as well.
It's a gift and the curse of, like, of being a person that, like, just naturally is thoughtful and introspective about how I'm showing up in the world, and and constantly comparing that versus the ideal of who I think I can be and who I would aspire to be. Yeah. Right. And that shows, and again, it's throughout all facets of my life, as a husband, as a father, right, as a friend, as a man. Yeah. Of course, as a working professional, like, just on all facets of life. It's just that constant desire to continuously improve. There's a Japanese saying called kaizen. Okay. Which is educate me. Which means continuous improvement, right? Like, there's no English equivalent to the Japanese word kaizen, right? So it's like Toyota put this when they were manufacturing their cars. like the whole motto of the company, the whole mindset was we have to continuously evolve. We can never get comfortable. Continuous improvement, Kaizen.
Got it.
Right. And so that's kind of just like the mindset that I have, which is can also be lonely because you're always going to fall short because we're human and we're not perfect. Right. So like you're always like it's a constant like just, you know, a constant journey.
Yeah, but I wouldn't. Well, I guess it's perspective because on that I would take the angle of if something is continuous, then there is no end, right? So if you're always going through this self-reflection, this self-improvement, this can always kind of get better. That means you're striving to do the work in the present to try to account for what that's going to look like, whether you attain it or not. But you know, that's still the same kind of philosophy that you still pour into your kids. So it still continues.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because that's the legacy, that your lineage will allow that to still exist and breathe once we don't.
I'm glad you brought that up because you are so right, because to me, the end game really isn't like when I'm 80 years old, 75 years old, and I just get this moment where I'm standing on top of a mountain and I get to just do a replay of my entire life. I think my legacy will be the state of my family when I'm gone, right?
Yes.
Will be how well do my children turn out? And more importantly, did I prepare them to be good parents? How are my grandchildren going to turn out?
Right.
Right. And
right.
so
right.
a lot of people, I think a lot of people get caught up in these things like generational wealth and all that. And for me, it's like, I want, yes, that's a big part of it, but also it is like, what are the values what are my kids going to stand on when they're 50 and 60 years old or they're 35 plus and they're starting their own families and they're raising their children? What values are they going to stand on? You know, because they say like values are caught, not taught. I told you, but we talked about that earlier.
For sure.
And, so anyways, it's just, legacy is like, to me, I think ultimately at its, when I strip it all the way down to its core, it is, I want my time here on earth to have meant something. Right. And so when I'm gone, I will still be here, but it'll be in the form of my children and my grandchildren, the generations. And I really think my life will have meant something if I was that pivotal point where like the trajectory of my family went from like this, because we've been on the come up since, however many generations back, right? Like at least the last 3 or 4 generations. I think every successive generation has done better than the generation before, and it's been fairly linear.
So it didn't stagnate. It was consistent. There was a consistent climb, a consistent increase.
And I think that's the case for a lot of families. Like when you zoom out, I think American life in general has gotten continuously better since like the beginning of the 20th century, right? Like we live in a better society now than we did 125 years ago.
That's questionable.
Well, it depends. It depends. Like
depending, on what very specific thing we're talking about.
Yeah.
But because again, we
in general,
can say the state of the country and government in the United States. I mean, yes, technology improvement. Yes.
Standard of living is much higher than it was.
Right? Yes.
Like people were using the bathroom in outhouses at the beginning. Like we didn't have indoor plumbing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
If you wanted to travel from one side of the country to the other. Yes.
There's
all
context.
So in general, what I'm just saying is in general, mankind, I think, is the quality of life and standard of life has if you just zoom out and just take it as a whole, right? I understand there are people who struggle very badly, and there are people who live like kings back then and who live like kings now,
right?
And people at all lots of life in between. But more so, what I want to be is I want to be that inflection point where we went like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I get you. I get that.
And it's not just a money thing. I think it's more so about and how do you continue that trajectory for the successive generations beyond. And so I just spent a lot of time thinking about those sorts of things, and that informs my day-to-day parenting with my kids.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's really, like, if that's the goal, then the formative years, the 0 to 18 years, I would say 0 to 25 years are the years where my impact is going to be the biggest on my kids. Right? So that's pressure.
Yeah.
I take that challenge very, very seriously.
So it's mindset.
Yes.
It's mindset, because if you're saying your goal is to be the inflection point for your family, if there was a steady steady increase, but you wanted to have a higher apex, a higher vertical, it would be found in the core values and the ethics, the morals that become the foundation for the family, which means that those things exist from generation to generation. And as the external things change, adapt, that can pivot, right? Where that inflection point happens and how often it does happen, right? Because now your kids can be the one to be like, oh, here's some level of innovation. Because we have the core values, that's just standard, right? Like
This
who
is
we
what
are,
we do.
what we give
This
it.
is what we do.
And then you're like, oh, I like it. Then we have this. So then we have that transition, and then it's like, hey, I think if I were to do this, we can do this. So you're able to go further because again, you've already laid a groundwork and laid a foundation. Now, it's like putting your kids on your shoulders, right? And you're walking with them. Their perspective is here, right? Ours is still here, but you've given them enough that once you put them on their shoulders, and they can see down. They can see further down. Like, oh, I see that there. That's somewhere we don't want to go. That's the direction we should go in. So I think it starts with that. So to your point, the foundational principles, the ability to give them what is going to be standard practice for your family, and then they can build off of that because they're getting information earlier. Those tools have now been refined generation after generation, and now the new thing that can come in is what's introduced in their generation that they can add to that. So now it becomes this kind of melting pot, right? The smorgasbord of saying, oh, like, yeah, like it took me 27 years, it took my daughter 5, right? So she's already off. She's already off to the races.
She's on it.
You know what I mean?
You're doing your job, right? Like,
yeah.
when you think about the things maybe that were limiting factors for you that are not limiting factors for her.
1,000%.
You know, and so just you wait. Because I think right now, the stage, I would say up to like with girls and specifically up to the point where their body starts to change. So that could be anywhere from like 11 to like 13, 14, is I call it parenting on easy street. You know, girls can be emotional, all those different kinds of things, but like what I will say is like once they start to yearn for a little more independence, once they start to be a little more impressionable, like what their friends are doing, what's happening outside of the household, that's where you get less of those constant like attaboys, like, okay, I'm doing a good job as a dad, right?
Got it.
Like that's when you're walking more on faith, and you
Got
just
it.
gotta trust that like, okay, I have laid a very good foundation. I kind of gotta let you, like, I gotta be okay with the fact that like you're naturally gonna like start to be influenced by other things, and you're gonna start to have your own opinions and your own views, and start valuing things that are like outside of like what has been taught in the core household.
Right.
But that's necessary, because ultimately what I don't want is I don't want to be this patriarch where everybody is like reliant on me the entirety of their lives. I want to build like these healthy, independent, successful men and women that are
breaking down the
me.
walls.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Not just it being contained to what you said earlier, limiting, right?
Yes.
The ability for them to say like, I can figure this out and I can push that obstacle. I don't always have to be reliant on dad. I don't have to always run.
Or to even
a
challenge.
parent.
Like, like that's good. Like one of the values that I went through an exercise with my family just last week.
Okay.
On first one. I've been doing a lot of reading about generational wealth, and about the old saying is that a family goes from shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And basically what that means is you have like usually a patriarch or a matriarch who is driven, who like has a good idea, starts a business, something, accumulates wealth in some sort of a way, and puts themselves in a situation where they can look after the generation that's after them, right? There's a substantial inheritance or whatever it is. They can help their kids buy houses, whatever that means, right? Pay for college. And what happens is that like the next generation is influenced by that somewhat, but by the time you get to the next generation, all the work that grandpa did or grandma did or whatever, they're not connected to that in any way, right? Like that's not a part. They were born into wealth, right? They were born into money, so they don't feel connected to that journey of building and grinding and climbing and like they just see the outcome. They don't see that they didn't see the process, right? And so this book talks a lot about like what are the most successful families going back to like, you know, in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century.
Okay.
Two of the most successful families were the Vanderbilt family, Vanderbilt University. Yeah. You got a university named after the family, and the Rockefeller family.
I
right?
Thought you were gonna. Yeah.
And so the Vanderbilt family, both families are still at least moderately successful, but there's a big difference in terms of the current generation of Rockefellers, how they're living, and the success that has withstood the test of time.
Yeah.
And the three things that they focus a lot on are, the first one is family history, right? So teaching your children about the history of where they come from so that they feel connected to that.
Yes.
Right? Making that a big part of their identity, is like, this is what we come from. This is why we are Bryces. This is why we are Miles, or whatever it is.
Right.
The second thing is a transferring of value, being very intentional and specific about the values that you're going to continually come back to with your children. And then the third thing is a healthy relationship, being a financial steward of whatever money that it is, right? And so having a healthy relationship financially with money.
Got it.
In which money is not viewed as something to necessarily show to the world to announce that you've arrived, but more so as a tool. As a tool to live a lifestyle, to live a lifestyle that you want your family to live, and you want successive generations to be able to live that, right? So I did a family meeting. Family walk through the history of.
So you, your wife, your 5 kids.
My oldest is in Arkansas at college, so he wasn't able to attend.
Okay.
The littlest one, she was 6 months. She was sitting there.
Right. You're right. No,
she's chilling,
soaking up the game.
Yeah,
no, she's still soaking up the game.
Yeah.
But these kids.
The middle three were all there.
Okay.
And I realized.
So that's the 19, 16, and then almost 10-year-old.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I realized, I was like, man, I think I've done a lot of these things intermittently.
Yeah.
But I've never set aside and dedicated a time focused on this specific activity.
Yeah, like a PowerPoint.
For this, I didn't do a PowerPoint, but I did. But I did in my mind, like, I did prepare for it as if I was preparing. I prepared for it as if I was preparing to present.
Bro, that's awesome.
To
man.
Executives, right?
No, that is awesome, because it's you're showing them how much you care about it.
That's it.
That's the sincerity of it. Like, to be prepared, right? Like that's when we go back to sports and, you know, education tests, and the ones that aren't prepared, you kind of see again what that outcome looks like, right? Like, those are the ones that typically fail, or they don't get what they thought or they don't get what is equatable to their skill or talent level. They get the outcome of what they put into that in that moment. Yep. So for you to show them and walk and say, hey, this is what it is that we're doing, and how you approached it is letting them know how they should approach it. Right.
Exactly.
And then the information that you're giving in that exchange is saying, like, Dad values this, and this is important to him. So if you just go off the premise, if they love you, they're going to be there and rock with that.
Yes.
Until they own it for themselves.
Yes.
Right.
And
because obviously you repeat it, because then it's behavior, it's pattern. You build you're building a habit. The more times you do it, it's now habitual. Now they can say, hey, this is something as involved, as intrinsic, as basic as us learning how to tie our shoes. Right. It's just a life fundamental. It's a Bryce fundamental. So now they're like, okay, cool. Now they're game.
They were so engaged.
And then they can contribute, and so there you go. There you go. Makes sense.
Specifically about the values thing, I told them, I said, look, I don't want to sit here and tell you guys like the values of what we're about, because I realized that the way I live my life and the things that I'm either constantly talking about or that I'm modeling are the real values that are gonna not values that I list out on a PowerPoint or on a whiteboard in front of the family, right? It's really like how I live my life and what we're constantly talking about.
For sure.
So I asked them, I was like, you know, I want each of you. We'll take a couple minutes here. Don't feel like putting on the spot right this second. Think about, what are the things that you think, the values that you think are most important to me, based on, you know, Jordan is my 19-year-old son. Jordan, based on 19 years of living, me being your dad, right? And I was so proud of the fact that, like, it was very validating because it was all the things that in my mind I wanted to list out.
Yeah.
And they were like, Dad, you're all about hard work, right? Your work ethic is incredibly important to you. Jordan, he's my intellectual son, right? Like,
Okay.
Well, all my kids are very smart.
Yeah,
I always push school and all that.
I
he's
get
a
it.
true intellectual.
I get it.
He is a true intellectual. And he said, you taught me like to be an independent thinker and to not just go with the crowd, but to do the research and formulate my own opinions based on what I believe in, not necessarily what's the most popular thing or what everybody else around me.
Yes.
Right. So that's valuable to me because I don't want my children to be sheep that just follow what everybody else says because they grow up in Fresno, where this is the pervasive mindset, or because they grew up in California, because in California this is the pervasive mindset, or because they grew up in a generation where this is the pervasive mindset. I want them to be independent thinkers,
the
right?
Path of least resistance.
Yes.
Because the sheep, it's easy. It's easier to follow the crowd.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's harder to be a man or a woman apart and be like, I'm gonna stand here, I'm facing that direction, and everybody else is going that way.
Yeah.
So it's
difficult.
easy to. So it's easy for somebody to be like, oh yeah, I can do that, and that's the whole peer pressure thing. I get that. That's like the whole, getting external information that is going to challenge, what it is that you're teaching inside your household, and then having enough faith and hope that your kids hang on to the root things for them to make their sound decisions. That's going to help them navigate what they're going to be dealing with on their own when they're not within arm's length.
Yeah.
So that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, him and I have had some knockdown, drag out dinner time discussions at the table over the years because, the generation that he's growing up in is very activist minded, very,
yes.
Right, and they have very, very
voter
strong
suppression, climate change. For sure.
The Israel-Palestine conflict, right? Like they have very, very strong opinions, and so
for sure.
And whether or not,
which is amazing. Again,
which is
because when
great.
I was that age, I had no idea. That's not, again, wasn't on my radar. I was pledging a fraternity. I just transferred to Santa Barbara. I'm pledging a fraternity. That's all I cared about. Yeah, so
which is
I was
cool,
back and forth. Yeah,
but I would always adopt a position that was opposite of his position.
Okay.
And we would debate. And I would, and whether I didn't, how I felt about it, I always wanted to present a counterpoint. And what I really wanted to the point I've always tried to get across to, he's the one that I've done it the most with, because that's what he naturally leans towards. Is you need to stop to consider that there are viewpoints other than yours, and that doesn't make those people evil or demonic or horrible people. They have a perspective that's different than yours, and a lot of times it can be supported with data, can be supported with facts, just the same way that your side can.
Yes.
Right? And so what I want you to do is rather than just blindly accepting things, I want you to do the research. I want you to think about like how you think the world should be, and then think about how this specific subject fits into your worldview. And I'm proud of the fact that this young man is incredibly thoughtful. He's measured before he speaks, and I think he probably would have been that anyways. But I think I feel like I helped a little bit at least to model that, like, hey, like you there's always a counterpoint. There's always a different worldview. There's always a different life perspective, and I think there's value in trying to find common ground, or at least examining the opposite.
Yes.
At least examining a different viewpoint before you come to your own conclusion.
It's having it's respecting perspective.
Yes.
Right. It's having and that's going to serve him well in all of his relationships.
Yes.
Right. Because again, when you're talking about peer groups, people tend to link up because they are attracted to the similar things about them that they see, about that other person that they see in themselves. And that just means you all think kind of
we're tribal
the same
by nature.
similar,
Humans
right?
are tribal by nature.
So getting to the point of the different perspective, that allows, again, those growth opportunities, because you can data, research, geography, core values, all of that then can be in a position coming from another person that does not agree with you, that they're giving to but to your point, it doesn't validate what it is they're saying.
Exactly.
Part of it is the merit in the conversation, and you find your truth in that. And you may
can learn
walk
so
out
much.
exactly, and you may
You
walk
learn
out of
so
that
much.
with
Yes.
being able to take something from that person that was able to give you that deposit in however long that interaction happened. So that's amazing, and that actually, without going through my questions, you're already hitting it, because that part of the, when you and I were having this conversation, you said you wanted to stay relevant. You said you wanted to stay relevant to your kids, and part of that how I kind of interpreted that was the evolution of who you are, and how you're able to marry past, present, future, because that's the relevance. That's the relevancy. So the question that I had for you was tied to, what are you doing on the daily to stay relevant, and what are the things you want to do to stay relevant to your kids. But you touched on part of that when you're saying, hey, this is kind of our family meeting, and then having that one-on-one with Jordan, walking through these conversations for him to say, I can think about this differently, right? Other than how I think. So is there anything else that, from a relevance perspective,
Yeah,
that
definitely. I would say it all starts with me, right? So
Yeah.
exactly what I'm trying to train Jordan do is what I do specifically. So I think in the day of social media, in today's day and age of social media, and algorithms that's constantly feeding you content that confirm your worldview, I'm the person that's actively listening to people. Right now, obviously politics are like a big deal in our world, more so than like when we were growing up, right?
Yes.
Like, I really wasn't that engaged, when it was, Gore versus Bush, right? When I was 18 years old, and
I
like
got
the
you.
2000 election, all that, I was like,
Gore, Bush, Clinton,
my
I got you.
parents are Democrats, so I guess I'm a Democrat, right? That was like kind of like the extent of like my thought process,
For
right?
sure.
So I'm constantly, absorbing information, absorbing different viewpoints, constantly checking myself to make sure that I really believe what I believe. And what I've found is that even at like, what happens is most of us get to a point where we feel like we've got the world figured out, our worldview is fully formed, and then from that point forward, we choose to consume content, we choose to read about things that only confirm that worldview.
Absolutely.
And I try to continue to be malleable. I try to continue to evolve over time as I learn new things, as I, and so I think that's one of the things that I do to remain relevant. I think the other thing is like, just self-awareness that like, it's very easy to get into like this comfort zone where like I can only listen to 90s hip hop, early 2000s hip hop, right? I can only, I could like all the things
It's coming back.
It is, right? It is.
It's coming back. The history repeats itself, so that you get the cycle of trends and these generations where you're like, oh, that's how I dress. And also, and it's also kind of empowering, because it made me think about like, oh, maybe I should dress a little bit like the 80s, because that's where I'm from. You know what I mean? Like, maybe I should wear these clothes and like get that earring or so. But anyway.
Yeah. So, but it's just just being aware of like I'm very close to my dad, and he's been massively influential in my life, in terms of like helping form like who I'm going to be as a man and all that. But he also like was very staunchly like didn't change with the times. He was who he was through and through, right?
Okay.
And that was one thing where I was like, you know what, I want to try a little bit harder to meet my kids where they're at. And to,
is that
and
where
to,
the relevance thing kind of came into play for you?
Yeah, that's
like being able to.
That's examining like, for all the great things that my dad did. Like, he never once ever would have entertained listening to hip hop, right? Or you know what I'm saying? Like, just certain things that like it's just, the way that I dressed during that time period, during those years of being in high school, bothered the hell out of him, right? Because the clothes were baggy.
Did you rock FUBU?
I rocked FUBU.
I rocked FUBU. I remember.
And Nietzsche, Fat Farm, right? Like all Rockaware, right? Like Sean John. Like,
Echo.
Echo.
I remember coming. I remember I had a day at Clovis West where, I forgot the name of the song, but remember when LL had the goggles.
Yeah.
And then the beat was like, and he's like. And he's in the video, and the video has like such a static.
It's Probably a Hype Williams video.
Every this kind of foreground, background, like it was. Yeah,
There's a lot going on.
Crazy, but I
Yeah.
remember that was. So I remember like rolling up one leg, had one leg down.
Yep.
I literally rocked some blue goggles, some black trim blue lens goggles on the side of my head. Yeah, in high school. So that was part of the food days, but it's part of that. So it's funny like when we're talking about influence, but even just kind of the baggy pants days, like
man,
you're like, oh, what is it? You're like, oh, I can see. You're like, I can see my thigh.
To be alive.
Yeah.
Definitely not from a fashion perspective, but what a time to be alive, right? Just in terms of like.
Now you wear pants, like, oh, I have hamstrings, I have quads.
Oh yeah, like legs all out, all that. So I'm not saying I'm trying to dress like young kids. I'm trying to age gracefully, I think.
No, but I know what you mean, though. But again, you were that part of it, the ability of
My kids
seeing.
still remind
You
me
saw
all
the
time.
previous generation, and you looking at your father, who. I think part of that work ethic probably came from, right? Like you're saying, like, 'cause you said he was a hardworking
Mom
man.
and dad, both of them, yes.
Very,
Yeah.
where we work and get establishing that, and then you reflect it, like you took some stock and some inventory on that, right? You're like, hey, who are they? What can I adopt and add to who it is that I am, and then what can you modify? Right, like what can you flex?
Just thinking back, I was like, man, it would have been really dope if like I could have been able to be like, Dad, listen to this verse.
Yeah.
Jay-Z just like this Jay-Z verse is crazy, right? But he would never even entertain it, right? So, but like now
You can talk.
like-
They not like us with your
Yeah,
son,
like-
right?
like
You can,
my-
you and your son can like let's see this whole like hip
my
hop
22
beef now,
my
like
22-year-old son is
Yeah.
like, we're talking constantly about like the Drake versus Kendrick beef, right?
Team
And,
Kendrick or
like,
Team Drake.
Oh, I'm Team Drake. I'm a mixed kid, right?
You're Team Drake?
I am. Yes.
No.
Yes. 100%. we could take a hard left on the podcast, and we could discuss my thoughts on
That would have been a show by itself. Because I am definitely Team Kendrick, but I get music and I get the conversation, I get the dialogue, but I mean to the point. You're saying
but I
you have the
like
ability
Kendrick.
to kind of connect. You have the ability to
Yeah,
have
but
this conversation with your kid,
but we're
and
chatting
then
on
your
that.
kid is like, yeah, like, and you're. That's probably the true definition of relevance, like because you identify.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it's not the thing of like, it's not their vocabulary. It's not like the word Riz or not the things they're saying that was like our things, right? Like that's dope, that's fresh. Like it's not that. It's the ability for you to say that you get what it is they're saying, and it's also important to you.
Yep.
Like what they have to say actually matters. It's not just, oh, I don't care about that music. Oh, I don't care about the fashion style. Oh, I don't care about that TV show. It's not that. Like you have the ability to say, like you can match and reach and be eye level. Like that's key. That's important.
I'm not. Look, I may come across and represent that I got this shit all figured out, and that I'm always executing at a 10 out of 10. Not always, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's times where I catch myself like invalidating certain things, and I'm like chalk it up, like, well, you'll figure it out when you get older and you get some life experience, right? Which kind of invalidates and undercuts like feelings that they have and all that. So I'm guilty of that stuff too.
Talk to me when you're my age. Yeah. Catch up, son. Yeah,
right,
it's not
right. Yeah,
it's not big. Drunk uncle at the picnic, barking at you, his beliefs. No, come here, boy. It's not. No, it's truly the ability to find connection, and I think that's what we all try to do. Like as friends, as partners, as professionals, as parents, we try to find connection. Right, like that's what it's about, and then again, the things where you don't connect on, be willing enough to learn and embrace that, right? Because then again, that's where you can take something from somebody else's life and be like, I'm better for that. So yeah, I think you're doing your job, like the relevance of being able to kind of the goal that you have, and to be able to connect with your kids, and being able to kind of nurture that where they still have. You still have their ear and they still have yours, right? It's not because a lot of times they turn us down, they turn us off, right? Or they press mute, right? And then it's kind of selective information because then they don't deem what you're saying important, or the way that we're addressing them is enough to not meet their emotional mental state and be like, this doesn't vibe with me, so I'm good. And then there's just that natural aversion to that, right?
Yeah.
But you're saying what you're doing, right? And that's pretty dope, man.
I'm really trying.
And going back to, we don't all have it figured. Nobody has it figured out.
Yeah,
Like nobody
yeah.
does.
I
Like,
want to be very clear.
We
to
can
point
write
out
books
that,
about it. I can do this pod about it. We can talk with like a million parents, and you'll get the things that connect you all, but then you'll get a million different responses to something at some point in time. It is, again, kind of the capacity just to kind of receive, right? And I want to make sure in my life it's reciprocal, right? Like that I'm not just talking, right? And that you are listening and that you are applying, and then you can give that to the next generation. For you, in the relevance conversation, but kind of more so like your parenting approach, like your philosophy. Does it shift when you are talking with your sons versus talking to your daughters? Like, does your parenting style change, like based off of sex and gender and walking them through certain things, like, or are you just, it's the same across the board, and it gets situation specific depending on what they're going through?
It's different from child to child. Not just like gender is one variable in that.
Yeah.
But like there's personality type. There is the way that they respond to certain things. So yeah, I mean, you have to, and I learned this growing up because I have two siblings, an older sister and a younger brother. We all grew up in the same exact household. I think my parents parented us all very, very similarly.
Big age gaps between your siblings?
My sister is 4 years older than me. My brother is 2.5 years younger, or 2 years younger than me.
Okay.
But our outcomes as adults were very different, right? And I think in hindsight, you just listen to my parents talk. I think that I could tell that they kind of wished that they had showed up a little bit differently from child to child, right? They did the best they could with the information that they had, and I think what I learned is that, and I think a big part of being in leadership in the professional world, what you learn very early on is that like everybody is their own Rubik's cube that you've got to like twist different ways, and like you gotta do things a little bit differently to get the outcome that you want, right?
Yeah.
Whether that outcome is understanding, whether that outcome is buy-in, whatever that outcome is that you're looking to go for.
That's why it's a people-driven thing, because it's the intrinsic part of the qualities and, again, their behaviors and their personality that you're able to speak to.
Yeah.
Where they are able to hold themselves accountable.
Yeah.
Right. It's the ability of, again, unpacking. Yeah.
Exactly. And then going back to what I said earlier, right, where I was like, hey, look, like my sons were able to go spend the night at a friend's house, but like not my daughters, right? So there are gender-based things, and I have to explain that because especially my 16-year-old daughter, Taryn, she's very like fairness oriented, right? She's like, well, you Jordan DJ this, or Avery's my 9-year-old, right? Like you did this for Avery, you did, and she's always like, well, she wants a level playing field. So I had to like let her know, like, hey, look, like, there are a lot of bad people out there, and being that you are a female, there are certain people that are a female, that you're attractive, right? Like all kinds of different there's different things that play into that put you at a higher risk than other people, than a boy, or there's not predators that target boys too, but bottom line is like I had to walk her through and explain that.
No, I know what you're saying. It's the disproportionate violence towards women versus towards 100%. Men.
It needs to be acknowledged.
I know what you're saying. Yeah, it's not
acknowledged.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, it's
trying to be careful with my words so I don't like
no
validate or like make it to like. I've
had similar conversations with my wife. No, a spade's a spade. I get what you're saying. It's not treating them different by virtue of treating them different. It's treating them different relative to how the world is finding ways to target and take from them.
Yes.
And the world does that more for women,
correct,
than it does for men, for
correct.
Young men, young women, young men. So I get that.
That was very well.
So I get that. 1,000%. I have two girls, and if we have a boy, my approach to raising him, will be the same as far as the values, the protection, the safety, the activity, the engagement, but I know there are nuances to the viewpoint of somebody's lens on them. That shifts, right? To what you just said. You said female and attractive, like that by itself. And don't throw in intelligent, don't throw in witty, don't throw in communicative, don't throw in all the and it's like the world has done a consistent job at finding ways to try to dim the light of those really strong, powerful young girls that become women.
100%.
So I get what you're saying, and I know part of it again is phrasing certain things and not misspeaking, but I 100% get what you're saying in the conversation as far as that approach, because more times than not, men are raised to take from women. So I get that.
I mean, yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, think about when we were, I don't know about like your upbringing.
Yeah.
But like when I went to high school, like, like in high school, college, like there was a lot of like unhealthy stuff that was held in high regard, right? Whether it's like number of sexual partners a dude has, whether it's like how many chicks you can have at the same time,
trophies.
Right? Like, can you get a chick to buy stuff
trophies,
for you, right? Like,
yeah, I got you.
Those were all those were all things.
No, that's I think that's a part of our generation. Like that's how I thought. Like that's the mentality that I shifted to when I got to Santa Barbara. So when I said earlier that I had 3 boyfriend-girlfriend relationships prior to my wife, and then the rest and stuff, and you define as casual, that was classy. When I saw that the world didn't accept me and my mentality as far as me wanting to have that college sweetheart relationship, one for one, I wanted this to be this beautiful origin story of like, this is how they met. And I wanted that. Right. And especially coming from a broken home, like I wanted to have a stable relationship. But again, I was way too pubescent in my mentality to really know how to even approach the opposite sex that way. But it got to a point that when I saw that I kept getting shut down from being able to not be accepted by what it is that I was offering, I switched. I changed. And I became a version of myself that, looking back on,
not a good dude.
Not a good dude.
Same.
When I'm a good dude.
Yeah.
When I'm a really genuinely good dude, because I know what's in me, and I know the things that make me nervous and anxious, and a lot of it is doing the thing that's wrong. Like that's the thing that tends to make me crawl. Like I want to do the right thing, right? And I want to be there and stand in the gap for people. I want to intercede when I see injustices, like your 16-year-old. What's fair? I want to be that, because that's what I thrive on. I thrive on that fairness and that equity, right? And even as a black man in the world, I want the equity. I want the same opportunity. So. Yeah, the world has shaped predominantly, because again, in these conversations, I'm glad we're doing our part today, but these conversations in households need to happen more, because there needs to be more fathers walking through these conversations with their sons and with their daughters on just the full transparency of how the world has raised boys and girls historically, because that's still something we're trying to shed, which is why you can say your kid's generation more political, more activist. Like it's not about the relationship, right? It's how can I change the world now?
Yeah.
What can I do now?
Yeah.
To make this better for myself and them? Like how do we clean up our mess? You know what I mean? And what we shaped and what we influenced. But yeah, there is, again, I think there's another shift that's happening. Is it going to be enough to move the needle where girls being born walk into a world that accepts them as they are without trying to change a single damn thing about them? Or are they still walking through the residual effect of, hey, stay in your place? Or do we revert as a society where that woman is supposed to be wearing a full-out dress and makeup, having an apron on, serving you a hot drink, a hot meal, and giving you your cocktail and massaging your feet? right?
Yeah.
Like how do we not regress? How do we progress? And then how do we consistently say that right now we can have an impact on the conversation about women's equity, women's empowerment? How can we consistently show girls that they can, right? And that they will, not just, oh yeah, I support you fakely. How do we get more women in leadership positions? How do we get more women as a head coaches coaching men in sports, right? How do we shift the mentality? Not just, yeah, I'm a fake ally. So I understand what you're saying, because again, that's the dynamic of, we're up against the generational mentality ideologies, and that's what we're trying to we put a hole in it and they plaster it up. You know what I mean? Because again, some people may set it back, so to speak, especially if they're in a strong position of power and influence, where then they
Well, there are a lot of
They moved
people
it
who
again.
there are a lot of people who like what I've found is a lot of people are like, look, what's wrong with the way things are, right? Like, it's generally not women, right? Like,
Yeah.
but like people who are in positions of either power or the common popular word now is privilege, but people who are in situations like where it doesn't really impact them, or you know, and maybe they're not the most empathetic people. Like it's like, yo, like what's with all? Why do we have to change everything? Why do we have to completely, like, you know, turn the table over, so to speak, like flip the table over when, you know? And so that's what I'm seeing is, and what I anticipate is like, I think we will get to a point where I think people will be free to not have to live in any sort of a box, male or female.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's another thing. That's another side of this, right? Like, I'm sure you, like being a stay-at-home dad, there's got to be feelings about, because the typical, you know, the normal societal standard is that a man is a provider, a man who, right? And so, you know, almost devaluing everything else, right? And like, that's our number one job, right? So bottom line is I think we're moving to a place where people are able to kind of slot in with what fits them, right? So if it's perfectly natural and perfectly fine if a girl wants to get married and wants to stay home with her children and raise her children. Yeah. You know, that's perfectly fine. Just like it's perfectly fine if she wants to become the CEO of a company. Just like it's perfectly fine if she wants to become head football coach of the Baltimore Ravens.
That
right?
part.
Like, those things are
That
all
part.
okay.
Yeah.
And those things are all
Yeah.
And the first one that I called out should not feel societal pressure that she has to go to the workforce if that's not what she feels passionate about doing, right? She should be free to navigate any path that she wants to navigate unencumbered.
Yeah.
Right? And that's true for females.
Yeah.
That's true for gay people. That's true for black people.
Yeah.
That's true for everybody.
Yeah.
If we live in a world like that, what we're going to find is we're going to find things like mental health crises and all these different sorts of things. They're never going to go away, right? Because there's all kinds of different trauma that contributes to mental health sorts of things. But the world will become a better place when people feel like they are free and unencumbered to chase whatever they're passionate about chasing.
Yeah, it's the independent thinking. It's the ability that decision. I think what people now are challenging how somebody came to that decision. If they wanted to, if they are a female and they make a decision in today's time to want to be married, have kids, and stay at home. I think it's people challenge how they got there. The independent thinking, the freedom of thought. To what you were just saying, I think that's the thing that is we're striving towards.
If everybody raised their kids to be independent thinkers and to be not saying my way of parenting is the only way to do it.
No.
But my thought process is like, imagine a world where 330 million people in the United States. So let's say there's 50 million parents at any given time, or 100 million parents at any given time. Imagine if everybody was like checking their kids, are like, no. You're going to be well thought. I want you to research this. I want you to be thoughtful about it before you formulate an opinion, right? And everybody, and so you kind of force kids to exercise that independent thinking muscle,
right?
Or that like I am going to have an informed opinion, because that's the other, like the good side of like social media and internet and all those things, and having all this information at our fingertips, is that our kids are far smarter than we were at that age.
Can I put it this, because this is where my brain just latched to? acceptance through knowledge, right? And not knowledge through ignorance,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Because we all want to be accepted, and we do want to accept other people, and other people all want the same thing. But then you can get the person that is into Georgia, gun laws, right? You can get that dad. It's like, here, son, here's a gun. It's an AR-15. Right? He wants to be accepted for his rights. But his rights, that thought, that ignorance impacts lives, right? The other part of that is research, walking yourself through how did you reach this conclusion? How did you get to that space, right? Now, that is an informed decision.
Yes.
Right. There is an exercise in thought and research and intelligence and, again, work ethic, because you have to do the work, right? It's not just, here you go. Plate, right? It's the thought process of, I walked myself through that to arrive there, right? After looking at these different variables, right? These different perspectives, these different inflection points. And now it is an informed decision.
I think
now
that's needed.
I'm good to be here and making that decision to do that, right? And
The
not
reason why
pushing it
that's
on somebody
exactly,
else.
and the reason why that's more important, it's important now more than ever, is because there's so much information that's available at people's fingertips, and it's so easy to have like to have the algorithm feeding you all the things that you think you believe,
Yeah.
right, and it confirms that, right? Like all
Right.
this confirmation
Right.
bias, where it just you're just continuously, anybody can make a YouTube account now and book some studio time and talk about something and put it on YouTube, and some young impressionable mind may pick that up and be like, well, this person said it, without even doing any research. Does that person know what they're talking about? Does that
Right.
person is
Right.
that person educated on this
Right.
subject? And accept that as blind truth, because
Yeah.
maybe they feel, maybe that person looks like them, maybe that person, whatever, for whatever reason, it confirms. And so I think in today's day and age, where so much information is flowing and so much information is readily available, and we have a generation that's very, very like focused on progress and change and all that, I think it's important to teach people to be critical thinkers, right?
Right.
And
Validate. Validate it.
is important, right?
You validate it. Like
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
get information. You can get that same person that opens up the YouTube account, and then that young viewer that watches that YouTube account, and instantly feel validated because of the things you just said. Like they identify.
And
but
that's how you get, like,
it's what's the source,
yes.
right? Is that
that's the things that
credible?
we learn.
Did you pull
Yeah.
it from something, right? Like, do you have the ability to go and dissect that? What is this person saying? That's why people feel like other people are frauds, or their cancel culture came in because they presented one thing and they really were something different, right? Because that's what happens. Because they already walked in believing something very specific and gave themselves to that and invested themselves emotionally into something, and then they're like, "Oh shit, this is what they did." Oh. Now we're quick to point the finger at them and be like, they did it, as opposed to what you and your mind believed in and why you chose to identify with that. Now you have to, it's easier to point that than to question yourself,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like what you were saying earlier about your first marriage, it was easier to say,
Oh,
as
super
opposed to
easy.
like,
and I could have had a
as
list
opposed to
of-
you walked in the mirror and you're like, oh, that doesn't look so good.
Yeah.
You have to own that.
Yeah.
And that's what people tend to run away from. Like they run away from that self-accountability,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think, again, when it comes down to what you're doing as a father, what I'm doing as a father, it's having that situational awareness, right? It's the ability to understand who we're talking to, where we're at, and again, even having the humility to go back and be like, I was wrong. Right? And that's another hard thing for people to do. Right? Like, just be like, hey, like, I got to own that. You know what I mean? Like, and it's almost cringe to say, I'm sorry. They struggle to say, I'm sorry. Like,
It's hard.
I've done it with, like, I've seen it. I've done it too. And my 5-year-old has also given it back to me. But I need to point the finger back at myself. Right? Because she has been like, she struggles to be like, I was wrong. She will die on her cross when she's like, which I love the conviction, but baby, wrong. Like, you have a very limited scope on what it is, and I also know what happened. Like I'm also aware because I watched it play out before you got to the point because I was seeing it. You weren't aware of my presence, but I saw it. So I can tell you this is where you misstepped, this is where you went left, this is where you arrived and why you arrived there, but you're wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's another thing for somebody to be like, I apologize, I'm sorry, that's on me. That's different.
It is.
Like, so that for me, that also kind of coincided when we talked about when you mentioned me being a stay-at-home dad and people having this dissection of what that looks like. Like it took me some time to be comfortable with that, right? Because I would want to say all the other things that I'm aspiring to do, not the hat and identity that I currently have, right? So it took me a while to be like, oh, I'm a stay-at-home dad. When I used to be like, I'm a writer and tap
dancing, right?
I feel like I'm sorry. I feel like that guy on Matt TV, right? Like the postman guy, the UPS dude, like he just couldn't sit and he's like everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Like it took me a while for me to embrace that because then I had to walk through a point of again shedding that skin, even though I've been doing it already. But this is like that full time. This is where it's coming from, right? There's no check I'm working for. There's nobody else employing me. I'm employed by my family, right? Like this is what I do, and this serves me and them. Right. So it took me a while for that to happen. And you know what's actually funny is that once I actually leaned into that, then that's where all this took off.
Yeah.
Because then things made sense.
Yep.
Like the ability of what my brand is, right? My association is family. My association is authenticity. My association is vulnerability. My association is innovation, right?
Yep.
Like these are the things and it's all driven from my family. Like what can I do to do my part and still serve my identity, but still serve my family? How can I mix the two, right? And that's where this comes into play for me to look at how I'm building this podcast to have this conversation, to have these conversations. That's where the children's literature, the Kid Lit come into play. That's where the ed tech comes into play, right? Mixing identities. That's where the film and TV projects come into play on like what kind of content am I creating? What stories am I telling? That's own voice. That is cultural representation. That is being able to criticize outside society on how they have viewed certain groups and being able to unpack how do we reach a solution? How do we get the dialogue happening? That's brand for me, right? And it's all built around the core family values, the core group that I have and how I identify who my target audience is, who I'm serving and why I'm serving them. What are the problems that we're facing that I can hopefully stand in a gap and do my part for? You know what I mean?
I feel you.
Like, so it's that mentality that I operate in. And then I think when I'm able to have conversations with individuals like yourself and we're able to just talk, right? We're able just to talk. And it's kind of like, this is, and like you, I had this thing against social media, like, but that was our generation because we weren't public that way. I think that's the bigger part of it. It's just that there was not a face to something that we were doing, right? We didn't have someone putting a camera in our face. I'm like, I caught you doing that. You know what I mean? Like, because it's that exposure. And then, you know, we were taught to keep private. Like what's said in the house stays in the house, right? Like that's that generation that we come from, right? These kids, they don't. Right, everything has been accessible. That is just the pace of technology, and that is a byproduct of technology. Like that, people are saying, "Hey, I'm able to share these things because it's part of this consumerism that we have. It's part of the things, like you said, the validation, the ability for you to be like, oh, this is that thing that you were talking about in your house, and then now you get ads for it. It's where all of that comes into place, right? That is the consumer bias. Good, bad, ugly, and different. They're just byproducts, right? It's how it's leveraged. But having that be kind of like the true, authentic part of who you are, I think that becomes the empowering thing. And then that's what we give to our kids, right? The ability to say that, be you. Be you. You're right. Like we're doing our part. Like we gave you X amount of tools and resources. Be you. And you change the world how you're meant to change the world because you have an it factor. and you may need to still find it. I may have an idea what it is, but you're going to need to cultivate that because that is your lived experience, right? And I think that's the thing that we do. That's the support that we have for our kids to like, let me give you that healthy kick. Right? Now it's time for you to make that choice and that decision. And then they're more apprehensive if you didn't build that level of independence in them, right? Because you took away aspects of their confidence. That's where you can get some of the mental health issues on on the anxiety, right? On the kids being so freaked out to move
Frozen.
and I can't and stuck and, it's paralysis by analysis. Like they're overthinking everything, right? Like, and I don't know, and should I, and maybe, and I'm just not.
Just go do it.
Just
right?
go. And they're like, I'm just not.
Yeah.
So I had to work through that for myself just to be here, just to do this.
I
Like,
bet.
I needed to walk through all of that for myself.
bet.
Like, and then I was on a cloud when I walked out of my first episode. Like, I went home, I'm like, babe, I did it. Because I put myself out there. I said it to John, I'm a screen guy. Like, I'm a writer. Bro, I'm a writer. Like, I talked to that. I talked to and before that was my pages, like when I wrote down my notebooks, like, and that was also a part where I struggled in my relationship because I couldn't communicate. Because I was like, damn, let me write a letter. Let me tell you how I feel. Like I walk through that for myself. Like, and then I've gotten better at understanding that this, and then when you put those together, that's the power. Because now you're seen and you're able to put a face on it, a stamp on it. You own it. It's your story. And to your point when we started, you said, you're like, do I look nervous? I'm like, no, you don't look nervous. Like, you're authentic. You are authentically you. And that's what we come to the table with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know you got to go soon because you got things to do. I think I have... So 2 more questions, and hopefully
I'll do my best to work on brevity too. Because
one is, I'm the same way. What is some of the best advice you would give to your kids?
I would say
whether you've done it already or whether you want to. Yeah.
I've always been very achievement oriented myself.
Okay.
So I would say if you're gonna do something, do it. Don't half-ass anything in life. If you're going to go after something, then go after it all the way. Okay. Or whatever that is. Yeah. Right? Sports, academics, extracurricular stuff, whatever it is, go for it all the way. The second thing I would say is life is funny in that what you put out, you're going to get back. And most importantly, in the way that you treat people. So if you treat people with respect, if you are warm and friendly to the most insignificant people, right? Maybe a person who's taking your fast food order. Yeah. If you treat people with kindness and respect and dignity, all the people that you come across in your life, that will come back to you in so many different ways. Yeah. Right. Through healthy relationships, through people giving you good energy back because you're leading with that good energy. And that will get you so far in life, just being a good human and just like treating people with dignity and respect. And those are probably the 2 biggest things that I would say is like, do your best always and treat people well. If they just do those 2 things, I feel like you can surpass like 75% of society just by doing those 2 things. Absolutely. Before you even start thinking about how smart are you? Do you have a special talent or skill? All those different sorts of things. Just those basic fundamentals of how to approach like life in general. I like that. We'll take you a long ways. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I like that. Because there's more things tied to that, which is great. Yeah. Right? Like there's the commitment, right? The ability to lean into something. The dedication tied to that is the empathy, the genuine respect. So there's more things tied to it, but I like that. That's cool. Last question, because again, I know you got to go. Because I got parenting things to do. I got a daughter as a soccer game. No doubt. I got to get her to Hanford here. And we do not want your dad here when he should be there. Yeah, so good. Avery will be pissed if Avery, okay. Good luck, Avery, on your game. Yeah. Last question. Are you now where you want to be at in life? man, this kind of harkens back to what I said before, right? I think the biggest challenge for me is smelling the roses, right? Meaning like just being satisfied with just satisfaction with my current state, right? Because I'm so driven to keep pushing the envelope, to keep doing more, right? Whether that's to be more successful in my professional career, to be a better father, to be a better husband, to go see more of the world, experience other cultures that I haven't had a chance to experience yet. Like I'm just always like, I live life constantly in the windshield, not in the rearview mirror, right? Like I'm constantly like, what's next?
Gotcha.
So if I was honestly speaking, I would say, no, I'm never satisfied fully with where I'm at. Now, with that said, I'm incredibly blessed. Like both my wife and I are, have been fortunate to be professionally successful. So, from a financially, we do pretty well.
What line of work is she in?
She's in sales as well.
She's
in medical sales. Yeah.
Okay.
I have healthy, beautiful children.
And I'm sorry, what's her name? I didn't even ask her.
Christina.
Christina.
Hi,
Bryce,
Christina.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I should have.
Shout out, Christina.
I should have topped that. And we definitely support our spouses and partners. So
yes.
So kudos to you.
Yeah, you'll meet her in the near future. We got to do it. Like
looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Because I need a bigger tribe. My tribe is my wife and my 2 daughters, and now we got a couple extension of that through other meetings and whatnot. But I'm looking forward to that. I have friends who are down south and whatnot, but we are trying to connect as much as possible, but that's still more rare than it is the norm. But yeah, I would love to. I would love to build on this for sure.
Definitely.
But yeah.
So I when I was out on paternity leave or parental leave for 6 months.
Yeah.
DocuSign, phenomenal benefits. Shout out DocuSign.
You had a snippet of being a stay-at-home dad, huh?
Yeah, I got for 6 months. I got to be a stay-at-home dad, and I got to smell the roses, and I got to really kind of just like evaluate my life. And yeah, I think I'm on a. So I think I've accomplished a lot to this point in my life. I think there's a lot more for me to accomplish, and there's a lot more. The job is not done yet.
Yeah.
But I do think I'm proud of my growth as a human and as a man. And I'm, it's an interesting question. My natural inclination is always like, no, I could do more, right? Like, net worth should be higher.
What I know of you, I wanted to throw that at you. You know what I mean? Because I think it's one of those things that, we do have to celebrate the wins, right? We do have to slow down because, like you, I'm a highly driven individual. But I found myself driving in a circle and driving myself without direction because I didn't know where I needed to go. But once you know that, then it's like, oh, I got to get there faster. like I got to go.
Yeah.
So I understand that. I understand that on I think damn near every angle and perspective on that, because it is about the continuous growth. It is about us building off of the last brick you laid and then finding the way to, again, now, can I improve that brick? Like, can I find different materials? Can I source it differently? Like, is it sustainable? Right? Like now you're like, how can I improve the situation? And then you want to carry people with you, right? You know, because again, it's there's no pressure. There's no pressure on the success that's there if, again, like the reasons why are really rooted. Like when you really know what you're doing it for and who you're doing it for, right? When you know that, like that reason, that becomes like your core driver, right? Like that's the product market fit, right? You're like, this is the problem, this is the solution, and then that evolves. Like then you get several iterations of that as you get feedback, right? As people make deposits into your life and say, hey, how can I help Jordan out? Right? Like, how can I be there for you? How can I stand in the gap for you? Do you need help? Right? And then even same, one to receive it on your side, and then one to even ask it, like if you're in a certain situation, right? Like that's the ability. Like, so again, going back to like your core group, I'm glad, you have your Trinity, you know what I mean? I'm glad you have your core group of friends and people to uplift you and give you that, because we all need that, man. We all need that. We all need to hear different voices, and we all need to feel supported. You know what I mean? And we do enough in life of this, right? Yes. Like it's just tunnel. It's just getting there.
Man. Community is important.
Yeah. So building off of that, like building off of like your community, but building off of the fact of again, I think as long as you continue to reflect on who you are as a person, like, yeah, man, life will continue to shine on you, man, and drop those healthy fruits back into your life, man. And I think, and I think we all seek that. We all want that in some kind of way, and especially as parents.
Yeah.
Right. Especially as parents, it's like how can they be and do better? How can our kids do that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what like my life is that. Like it's the ability for me to again pour into myself and get that little bit. Like how you said the mental health part of like your day, like being able to like go through and go to the gym and like start your day and like burn and deplete, and then pour it back into yourself because that's how you started your day, right? And then everything else that is part of your day is reflected to that decision.
Yeah.
Right. It's a reflection of, and then you're able to be like, I'm good. Like I got gas for the trip. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then when something's off, then it's like, I just don't feel like it today. Like something is not quite. So as as you continue to take that self reflection and you know where you're at and you know where you want to go, I have no doubt you'll get there, and I have no doubt you'll get there with grace, man.
My brother, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
It
man.
means a lot coming from you. It means a lot.
Absolutely. That's all I got.
The marathon continues.
That's all I got, man. Yeah, no, we shut this off and we go back to putting on dad hat and being who we are for our significant others.
That's right.
Before I check out, if you like this episode, feel free to check out youtube.com/@diaperbagdad. And if you want to see all the other things I'm doing with my business, the new website I told you was coming. It's here. It's www.peasix.com, p6.com. And I'll put that on somewhere on the title on the screen here, maybe. How about that? But yeah, cool. Thanks for rocking out with us. Jordan, man.